to worry. I was at a conference on Friday where I plugged my laptop in and the projector literally broke. That was not good at all. Okay, so this is a talk that I did at a responsive day out in Brighton a couple of weeks ago. It was literally the biggest audience I've ever spoken in front of. I've never been so terrified in all my life. But it seemed to go all right, so I'm going to do it again here, and hopefully you'll find it enjoyable. So I kind of had this email out for brief from Jeremy. Jeremy Keith, who's the organiser, asking me if I'd speak at a responsive day out. And my initial reaction was, yes, wow, what an honour, that's amazing. How on earth have you ever heard of me? Sort of thing. And so I agreed immediately, and then went away and thought, shit, I have no idea what I'm going to say at this thing. What on earth can I tell everybody that they don't already know? Because, you guys, you're all my equals and peers, and they were in the audience then as well, so I was a bit worried about that. And after a while, I kind of thought, well, the one thing that's really unique to me that I can share is actually my experiences of building responsive websites. So that's what I'm going to do today, again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about all the things I did horribly wrong instead of what I think you should be doing to deal with clients and responsive sites. And hopefully you'll find that a bit more interesting and you will learn more from it. We'll get the boring bit out of the way first, which is who I am. I can kind of skip this because Mary's already told you, but I think she just read off my script. But in case you didn't, this is me. If you've never seen those photos before, then there you go, once more, and then they'll never be shown ever again. But more importantly, this is what I do. So I have a day and a night job at the moment. My day job is running my own business and building bespoke WordPress websites. At night, I also organise Shop Geek, which is events for geeky people, mostly in Shropshire, but we also do, as well as socials and events like this, we also do a national conference, which, if you'll excuse me, I'm just going to shamelessly pin briefly for you. It's on September the 26th. We've got a really awesome lineup. Tickets are £89, early birds have now sold out. But it's going to be a fantastic day. And it's a very good excuse to come and visit Shrewsbury, which is a very lovely medieval town, which is not that far away, because I made it here. So please do come along. So anyway, now I've got that out of the way, I'm going to ask for some audience participation, because now you all have beer, I don't want you to fall asleep. So I'd like you all to stand up, please. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is partner up with the person next to you, making sure that people aren't left out on the end. However, I'm still not convinced that my insurance would cover it if you'll kill yourselves. So what I want you to do is ask yourselves honestly if you would perform this trust exercise with the person that you just partnered up with. No. client will be feeling when they first approach you for a website of any description. In this context, we're going to say a WordPress website. And that's because the trust doesn't immediately appear between you and the client. It has to be nurtured. You have to grow it. And you do that by providing deliverables at key stages of the project. So you will show the client things that you're doing, or you'll have key points that you'll have sign-off and things. So at all stages, they know what you're doing, and they trust that you're doing what's right for their project. So taking back in the olden days now, before the days of responsive design, your project workflow probably looked something like this, which was pretty straightforward. You do your discussions, you would do wireframes and planning, and you'd show the client, you'd probably get that signed off. Then you'd do designs. A lot of the time they'd be Photoshop or something similar, and they would be pixel perfect. You'd then build it, hand it over to the client, job done. There's not a lot of effort there as far as building trust is concerned, because you never needed to have to do it before, because this was it. You would show them wireframes, and the client would know exactly how the website was going to work. You'd show them the design, and the client would know exactly what the website would look like, pretty much in every browser, because that was it. So what you promised them, you would literally deliver. So you wouldn't need to work on the relationship as much and build that level of trust. So a little bit after olden days, I decided I was going to go freelance and set up on my own, because for whatever reason I found it difficult to stay up to date with the latest trends and things like that, and I thought by being a freelancer I'd suddenly have all this time to learn new things. And this is what I thought freelance life would be like. If you were at Responsive Day Out, then you will have seen this before. If you were at WordCamp Bournemouth, you will have also seen this before, because I do believe this is my best work. And so I will now reuse it everywhere until it's no longer funny. But this is kind of, I thought freelance life would be much easier, and I would learn lots of new things. I'd have plenty of time to read blogs and try things out, and have half a gazillion side projects that obviously I'd have time to put all of them live and things like this. And that really didn't happen, and I was finding it very frustrating. So I made a decision with my business, along with a bunch of other stuff at the same time, was that I was going to change it to responsive as default. I was already doing WordPress only, so now I was going to do responsive as default, which basically means that if somebody came to me for a website, they just didn't get an option. It's like, right, I'm going to do a responsive site, and that's what you're going to get, and if that's not what you want, you've come to the wrong person. But I considered myself quite late to the party as far as responsive design was concerned. It's a term that's been bandied around for quite a long time. Most of my peers and people that I knew that were doing this sort of stuff were already way ahead, and so I felt quite late to the party. And by changing my entire business model to the responsive design stuff, it opened up. It gave me a lot of options, but it also raised a lot of questions, and I didn't know necessarily how best to approach dealing with the client specifically, and what to show them as far as deliverables were concerned, because I'd had my tried and tested pattern that, never even had to think about it before. That was just the way we did stuff. So that's what I'm going to go through next, is some of the things that I tried and got horribly wrong. But before I do feel that this disclaimer is important, because I'm about to tell you all about my mistakes, which is not an accurate representation of my business. My pride. It means that, I have to tell you this so that you don't think I'm just a stupid cat. But before I do, here's disaster parakeet. There are never enough animated GIFs on the web, I don't think. So, in 2012, that was when I first started doing the responsive design by default. And the first approach, I kind of decided, right, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do it. And I'm going to jump in the deep end, and I'm going to start applying it to existing client work, because otherwise I'll never actually start. So the initial approach, because I had projects already happening, was to literally just tell the client nothing at all. I would do the website and I'd provide it exactly as I'd spec'd out, but when it came to the brand unveil, so to speak, you'd get the surprise at the end. ask them to resize the browser, and then, oh, look at that, it's responsive as well, isn't that amazing? This, for me, is, as far as client satisfaction goes, this is still my favourite approach, because I've never had clients that happy before, and never since, because they just seem so chuffed when it's like, look, you resize the browser and it does this. Because I had no idea I was going to do it, or I just kind of did it as extra. And I really did see, I don't know what's going on at that children's party, but she seems very surprised. And I did see expressions like that occasionally, which I thought was a tad over the top, but hey ho. So that was great, I thought, to start with. There were some serious advantages. My clients were very happy. I didn't need to change my workflow as far as providing deliverables was concerned, because I wasn't showing them anything different. So I'm still working through, this is how the desktop version is going to work, and this is what it's going to look like. But oh look, the mobile version is going to do this. But there were some pretty crazy disadvantages. The biggest one was because it turned out to be a really steep learning curve for me, because there was no planning. So in a lot of cases, I had already done wireframes and things, so now when I was trying to build this website, this nice WordPress site, there was 3 columns. I had a menu on the left and then half a dozen adverts underneath. Now when you drill it down into 1 column, you had your menu button, half a dozen adverts, and then content, which is not, you can't have that on a mobile device, that's ridiculous. So the learning curve of, found bits of JavaScript to cheat with that and shift things to other parts of the side of things was really quite steep. And that also had the knock-on effect that I suddenly was spending an awful lot of extra time on these sites, which I couldn't charge for because I hadn't told anybody I was going to do it. And I'd basically gone back to the really, really early days of my business where I didn't have time for sleep. Nobody wants to do that, it's not fun. So pretty much as soon as I got the projects that I'd actually applied these to out of the way, I knocked that on the head and moved on to approach number 2, which was slightly different, and that was just to promise them nothing. So I still went through the desktop phase and showed them exactly what they were going to get, but this time I didn't tell them I was going to do a responsive design, but literally make no promises at all about what it was going to look like. Which is ingenious to me, I've got to be honest, at the time. I could not see the downside. But there were some advantages. The clients were still happy because they cared about what the desktop version looked like. I mean, even though I felt late to the party, as far as my clients were concerned, responsive design was still a buzzword and it didn't mean anything to them. So, as a general rule, until I actually explained what it was, they weren't that bothered. I still didn't need to change my workflow very much. I still showed them wireframes, Photoshop files, did that for my desktop, for the desktop version. And I could now increase my timescales so they're more realistic, so I have time to sleep. And I could increase my costs as well because of the amount of extra time I was suddenly spending on them. The downside of that, unfortunately, was because I'd not told them anything about what the mobile version was going to look like. I thought that would be brilliant because I'd have lots of freedom to kind of edit it and get it to how I want without being committed into something very specific. But I'd not shown them anything about what it was going to be like, so they'd gone off and formed their own idea and their own level of expectation, which of course I'm never ever going to meet. So when it came to the grand unveil, first approach, I had this huge surprise and everybody was over the moon. With this one, yeah, they'd be pleased with the site, but when it came to showing them the mobile version, I'd get comments like, oh, well, I thought it was going to be more like Amazon. Or I asked a local vicar and he said that he thought responsive design was this, so I thought it was going to be more like that. Because I just left him to it, and they've gone off and done their own thing, figured it out for themselves, obviously drawn the wrong conclusion, and there's just no way that you can ever live up to that. So that was a bit of a disappointment. So by approach 3, I tried various other approaches with varying degrees of success. And then I was approached for a really, really big WordPress build, which I was really excited about. It was very data-driven, had lots of advanced custom fields and stuff like that, and I was very excited about it. It was working brilliant. But I knew from the outset that because of how much data was involved, the way I'd been working up until that point just wasn't going to cut it for this project, and I was going to have to do something completely different. And by now, there were lots of people that were designing in the browser and things like this, and I've not really given that much of a go. So for this one, I decided I was going to go straight to the code. Coming from a developer background, I was really excited. I thought this was going to be awesome. It turned out not to be quite so, which I'll explain in a moment. But it meant throwing away basically all of my previous workflows and what I was showing the client and things like that, and starting again. So this time I did things a little bit different. I still did my initial discussions, I still did plans and stuff, but I did those more for my benefit rather than showing the client, basically so that when I got to my text editor I wasn't looking at a blank screen. Because the plan was to build wireframes first, and then build WordPress in, and all of the content, the data and things like that, and get the information architecture right first, and then work on the user experience and everything else. And the idea was the design would grow organically around that, which I thought was a genius approach. And all the time I'd have this open discussion with the client as we were working on the project. When I first met him, we both seemed on the same wavelength as far as what we liked design-wise and what the end goal of the site was going to be, and what was really important about it. So I couldn't see how this could go wrong. But, which was quite a big but, I was starting to get comments that seemed vaguely familiar, and the reason why was, who remembers this? I still think this is hilarious. It's slightly less so now. And the reason was because these sorts of comments were starting to become much more familiar. So there was discussions back and forth about fonts, which was frustrating. And then there was comments about the website being liney, which seemed almost, this was an exact comment I'd had, which I was slightly confused about because the blue map marker is square, so that wasn't actually going to help at all, but I did it. But then we progressed on to things like this particular comment. which is kind of when I knew the project was starting to tank and I was going to have to do something drastic to try and pull it around. Especially because at the time I didn't have a copy of Excel on my Mac because I was convinced Microsoft's evil and therefore I'm not going to pay them any money. I have since backed down simply because somebody sent me designs in Excel. So that turned out not to be quite so fantastic approach after all. The advantages were, yes, I did get to build my wireframes, I did have fun by going straight to the code, and I did get to do the information architecture stuff. But the disadvantage kind of almost completely overshadowed that because I'd given them no deliverables. I'd set no expectations because I'd just assumed the guy was exactly on the same wavelength as me, and we were in the same place as far as the project was going, that I'd left him to his own devices. But ultimately, while he was happy to watch the website progress, he couldn't see what the end game was, so he went off and made his own, which then meant I spent a lot of time having to explain why these things in Excel would not work when you actually put them in a website and things like this, which, again, same with every project, means that deadlines got missed and it started to cost a lot of money. So it was not the ideal solution I was hoping it would be. So anyway, just for something completely different, we now have a peekaboo just to make sure you're still paying attention. Okay, so now I have a much more practical approach in 2014 because there is no one fit solution for your client. We're not. Before the days of responsive design, there was that one approach that basically just worked, but now less so. So my approach these days tends to look a lot like this, which looks kind of jumbled. It's less so. It's because I still have the discussion phases, and I still plan things. Sometimes I'll just do sketches, which I'll upload and add notes to and things. Sometimes I'll actually build wireframes that they can see. But then I'll have another discussion with them, and then I'll show them designs. There are some arguments now that people shouldn't really be bothering with Photoshop files anymore, but some of my clients still need them. But other times I can show them style guides and mood boards and things, and what the buttons will look like and the colours that I use, because they're happy just to go with the wireframes and that, because they can see the end game, which is what I've got so wrong with the last approach I described. But ultimately, the most important thing I always do now is I show them my ideas. It doesn't matter if there's no clearly defined deliverables, as long as you show them something so they know that A, stuff is happening, because if you just go silent for a couple of months they tend to panic, but also just so they know that you're on the same wavelength as them. So, there we go. So a few lessons learned from these approaches I took. Trust is really important. That's always been the case, but actually it doesn't come as easy anymore. So we have to work harder at it. We do need to plan a budget properly still for the time needed. Surprises are never a good idea, even if you think you're doing the client a favour, because it will always come back and bite you, so one way or another. Always set expectations for every aspect of the project from the beginning. Don't gloss over bits of it so that you've got freedom to do whatever you like, because that doesn't work either. Definitely don't leave the client to their own devices, because they will go to a coffee morning at the church and ask everybody that goes and form their own opinions. And if you really can't provide clearly defined deliverables, just show them your ideas. They need to see something. That's the most important thing. And probably a personal one for me is to make less gigantic decisions about my business, or at the very least plan them a little bit better. Thank you very much. So apparently there's questions maybe? No? Awesome. Oh, sorry.
Is it just you, or do you have a team?
It depends on the project. I quite often will have other people working on the project as well, but it's me that does most of the client facing stuff. Yeah.
The problem I have is getting deliverables from a client.
Is what, sorry?
Getting stuff from a client.
Getting stuff from the client?
Yeah, getting them to take decisions or come up with their bits of content. And I would say that almost every project I've got and I've had, apart from a few notable exceptions, I've always been held up by a client.
Right.
They don't have, some people have different parts of the client organisation, having different views as to what should be done.
Yeah.
Some like some things, others like.
I
Will never come up with their content.
With the views to the design, I kind of, I'm quite clear in the beginning now that I saw Andy Clark mention this. I think it might have been Handheld Fault, that if they went in the initial design meetings and they don't get a say in the design process, because otherwise at the end it's happened to me. I've done a website and then it'll turn out I've been working with the marketing team, and then the managing director of the company will step in when it's all finished and ready to go live and go, no, that's not what I was expecting at all. So I'm quite upfront about that, because that's bitten me before, and I give a schedule of the project at the beginning of, right, okay, so I'm going to show you something to do with the design by this stage, but in turn I also need content from you by this stage, and if you don't provide me with the content by that stage, then the project is going to get held up and we're not going to meet the later deadlines. And it depends how invested they are in making sure the website goes live on time then.
Well, generally in my experience they will slip, but I absolutely agree with you with showing up and discussing ideas. And they might start out as a sketch at first, and then you might do a mock-up.
Yeah.
I've gone away from doing wireframes because I find it easier to do a quick prototype.
Fair enough. Cool.
Okay, well, let's give Kirsty a round.